Put a little spring in your step with great savings rates from Andrews Federal Credit Union. From now through March 31st, you'll earn 3.75% APY on your savings when you open our 3-month Spring Forward Share Certificate. Start with as little as $1,000 and watch it grow. Open your new share certificate at Andrews Federal and spring forward towards your savings goals. Get started now at andrewsfcu.org. Andrews Federal Credit Union, federally insured by NCUA. APY equals annual percentage yield. For eligibility and membership requirements, visit andrewsfcu.org.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 526 for March 19th, 2023. I am Brendan Cassidy.
And I'm Ryan McQuaid.
And I'm Jay Ledbetter.
Thanks for joining us this weekend, everyone, for what is going to be the first of many podcasts coming up where it's going to be some variation of the three of us specifically. It's going to be some new ground we're treading here. For those of you who didn't hear the news on episode 525 between myself and my usual partner in crime, JD Duran, our father of InSession Film, if you want to call it that. He is a dad yet again. His new son, Andrew, has been welcomed into the world. And Woohoo! Of course, great news. We are so happy for not just him and also, his wife, Brandy, the entire family. I'm honestly most excited for their son, Sam, who was so excited just to have a brother in his life.
Really embracing it early.
He really did. And just his reaction when they did the gender announcement for Andrew, and Sam's face and his reaction honestly was all you need to see. But understandably, JD will be taking some time to really just spend some time with his family, a paternity leave of sorts from InSession Film. We wish him and his whole family the best, but we are continuing the game here. We are going to keep InSession Film going. So Ryan and Jay, thanks for being here. How you gentlemen doing?
I'm doing all right. Congratulations to JD. And we're so happy for everybody there in Florida and the whole Duran family having a new addition. Can't wait for Andrew to get on the mic and really, just
still waiting for Sam to get on the mic.
Yeah, they're going to take
that age.
Honestly, it's going to be like an InSession legacy sort of thing. We're all just going to retire at a certain point. We're never going to be on the mic again. We're just going to pass this down
That'll be the gimmick of
child
what will make our podcast stand out.
Yeah, but otherwise, it's been good. It's been a good week. Glad that I just got back from South by Southwest. I'm glad that's over. Yeah. I can now rest. I can now be with you guys. I can talk about movies that are not just new or from last year. I can just talk about movies that are more near and dear to my heart. More of the things that we love. Get back in the old swing of things while also keeping the ship afloat while JD's out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm the only pod father left, I guess.
Now. I was gonna say
I'm the only daddy left, and in honor of JD, I am wearing my.
I was going to ask what that
Rad
said.
Dad.
My Rad Dad shirt.
Oh, that is perfect.
So you gotta give it up to all the dads out there. Shout out all the dads. And obviously congrats to JD.
Yes.
It just really stinks that I won't be able to fight with him on a podcast for a while. But, you'll be hearing plenty of myself and Ryan and Brendan, obviously, coming up here. And I'm doing a review with Brendan this week that maybe I wouldn't normally do. It would probably normally be a JD review.
Yeah,
and that is his ultimate revenge. It is. What do they say in The Usual Suspects? The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing people he didn't exist. Well, the greatest trick JD ever pulled was getting Jay to review Shazam: Fury of the Gods the first weekend that he had his second child. So.
And of course, we're recording this literally minutes after this exchange. Not just on Twitter, but also in our group chat, where JD literally rubs it in your face, Jay, by tweeting how he's watching Dog Day Afternoon, and you had to watch Shazam: Fury of the
absolute
Gods.
banger.
I had a dog day afternoon watching that movie. I got to tell you.
Well, we will have a full review of Shazam: Fury of the Gods coming out pretty soon, either before or after this specific episode that we're recording here. It will be between myself and Jay Ledbetter here, and that sounds like that's a bit of an indication of how we feel about that
You
movie.
think so?
I mean,
know so.
honestly, I'm so bummed I'm going to miss out on that review. It's one of those things that just schedules couldn't line up, and nor did I give a crap about
Ryan,
watching
will
that
you
movie,
ever
so.
watch Shazam: Fury of the Gods on HBO Max?
Yeah, when Hell
You watch,
freezes
like, everything.
over. Yeah,
I
when
don't
Hell
know. You watch like everything.
I'm not going to watch a movie that has no future whatsoever within any connective universe unless you have to physically pay me and get me there. There's no way I'm going to do it. That being said, look forward to my review of The Flash later this summer. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to review that movie. I'm not going to. Honestly, I am so proud of Jay for actually going to the movies and seeing it. As a father, he has limited time and resources. So to go to the movies and see something, it was a true, and like he could have seen so many different things this weekend, but he chose Shazam 2. What is it? What is the tagline? Shazam 2?
Fury of the Gods.
Fury of the Gods.
I mean,
I watched two films today. One was directed by Wong Kar-wai, and the other was Shazam: Fury of the Gods.
I mean, grammatically, we got to say Shazam.
Yeah,
Fury of the
yeah,
Gods.
sure. But also at the same token, though, no, I'm never going to watch that movie. There's some movies I just never watch. Like, I rather, honestly, and I know how much you both do not like this movie, but I would rather watch Cocaine Bear and see how bad that thing is than watch Shazam: Fury of the Gods. I rather
That's a talking point for sure.
I need to watch 80 for Brady. I need to watch New Magic Mike.
I'll never watch.
You know what I mean? I've got some movies this year that I have not seen. Now I will say,
Oh, you haven't seen Magic Mike yet?
No, I haven't seen the third Magic.
I haven't
Mike
either.
yet.
Yeah, that's
I've
on
been
my
a little
list.
bit
I need
behind.
to see that one.
I'm like as many movies as I've already seen this year. There are a ton of movies that I need to catch up on still. And then there's a new Zach Braff movie which is going to sweep the nation next week. So
we'll see about that.
That exists, I guess. No Kickstarters for that one, for sure. Maybe an
This
OnlyFans
is what
page.
you get with me and Ryan on the podcast. We're 7 minutes in. We haven't even started talking about what we're talking about on the podcast.
We only have one topic here, so it might be good to stretch it out a little bit.
Yeah,
And
we're
honestly,
doing fine.
Look, if
honestly,
you want to stretch it out, you got the right guys.
I know. I mean, when it's the three of us, or when it's you two specifically, we might as well call it the Rabbit Hole Film Podcast. It's basically what it is. But I'm glad we're getting the I guess the cynical juices out a little bit, because this episode is meant to be purely celebratory. It's meant to be respectful. So let's get those cynical juices out, and then we'll transition and focus on what matters here. And given the fact that the new release was Shazam: Fury of the Gods, we discussed this offline and thought there's not really much that we can pull from as far as a topic that we haven't already done on the show in some way before. We've already talked about, at least in some capacity, the new DC universe structure that is happening under James Gunn and Peter Safran. So we've delved into those waters already. So we've decided to use our good friend JD Duran as inspiration for this specific episode, which I think this is a first. Is this the first time that a podcast host has inspired a top 5 list in some way? I feel like it might be.
First time in history.
First time in history that's ever happened. Yeah, we are the first to do that. So Guinness Book of World Records, I hope you're listening. But yes, with JD now a father yet again in his life, we are using that as inspiration to talk about our top 5 movies about fatherhood. Might be a little bit premature given the fact that, Father's Day is 3 months away as we're recording this. So it doesn't quite tie in with that, but we wanted to honor our good friend JD. He is obviously taking time off for the right reasons, and we wish him and his family the best. And we wanted to use that here as inspiration for movies about fatherhood, which can cover the gambit in many ways. We can go in many directions here, which is why criteria is going to be very important. So let's go ahead and talk about what our respective criterias were and what we used when picking this list. So Ryan, why don't we start with you?
Well, kicking off in usual fashion, I misunderstood the prompt coming into tonight, and I thought we were doing father-son films, but my list wouldn't be much more different than usually that. I mean, it is.
In many
we have
ways,
talked about
that might be more appropriate, given JD having a son. I think it's more related in that way.
Well, we talked about I think like father-daughter movies in the past, Brendan, when we did Leave No Trace.
283. Yes, I have that listed here.
And that was a very hard list to pull from. But like here, I don't have many obviously father-daughter films, though I do have some in honorable mentions. But I'm pretty satisfied with the list that I do have. The 5 films that I'm going to stretch the limits in trying to saying that these are movies about fatherhood or father-son films. I will say that I did have one giant film in the penalty box, and that is, of course, Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather. I feel like you gotta put that movie in the penalty box, especially since it's my favorite movie of all time, and the listeners have heard enough of me talking about it. Especially when it comes to this, you got to put that one aside. But other than that, everything else seemed to be very much fair game. So that was my criteria. Jay,
not talking about the Tree of Life, not doing it anymore. Not doing it anymore.
No, you
Last
sure?
time I talked about it on the podcast,
my first question.
Cried, most embarrassing moment of my entire life.
He's mentioning it right now. He could cry at any second.
I watched it again this weekend. My wife and son were out of town. I watched that film on the couch by myself, bawled my eyes out on the couch. And so not talking about it again. Not going to do it.
No, you're not going to do it.
Also, I've talked about it plenty. If there's any movie I have given my complete thoughts on, it is The Tree of Life. So not doing that one.
Wait,
that's my only qualification.
Jay, do you like The Tree of Life?
It is my favorite film of all time. And I will say this about the films that I have chosen. You might not say some of these films, like the driving force of the film might not be fatherhood. But to me, whether they're explicitly about that or not, or at least mainly about that or not, they are really wonderful depictions of fatherhood in some way or another. And maybe you could argue that even if at their core they might not be about that, the thing that I take away from them the most is their depictions of fatherhood, their depictions of fatherhood. So
can't wait for you to mention Die Hard. It's gonna be great.
Look, Die Hard, you could do it.
You could make.
You could do it.
Yeah, you could stretch it that way. I don't think
put all 5 Die Hard films in your top 5, and you'd be honest.
Right. I mean, honestly, we tried to keep this broad for that reason that Jay's talking about, because there are aspects of fatherhood we wanted to focus on that, or at least there are many aspects, and we wanted to try and have a variety here, because that really is what it is. And I'm sort of taking some cues with that criteria for mine as well, really looking at the fatherhood aspect as something of a positive thing. The attributes that we want to try and gravitate towards and feel inspired by, and trying to look at it.
That is not my list. I will say that.
At least I'm trying to do that, because there are some movies here I can look at that are way more. I don't know if cynical is the right word, but very negative. One of them on my honorable mentions, I'll say, was really much about paternal abandonment. And I didn't want to talk about something like that, especially given the fact that this list is being inspired by someone we know. So,
I will say, for the person that is a dad, mine are mostly the exact opposite of that. So
I love that.
Get excited.
And I think I'm somewhere in the middle. So there we go.
I will also say we should officially dub this list our top 5 midnight special movies. And that's of course our good friend JD Duran, who loves the movie Midnight Special and wanted us to at least acknowledge it in some way. It's an honorable mention of mine. It's not on my list, so we'll just throw it in there right now by calling it our Midnight Special movies if JD wants to hear it that way. But let's get into our respective top 5 movies about fatherhood, or in your case, Ryan, top 5 movies about fathers and sons. So what do you have as your number 5?
Well, my number 5 is a movie that I recently rewatched as of last year, and I think it's a great film, and it's called Road to Perdition. Heard of it?
I knew this was going to be on your list.
Sam Mendes. So obviously,
Empire of Light, a film that we all love.
We all just cuddle up to a copy of that every night. And remember when it's not about the movies that get you there, it's about the crazy popcorn lady behind the desk that really inspires you to be at the movie theaters. Anyway, no, Sam Mendes' film, it's his best film of his career, still for me, and it follows Tom Hanks, who plays this enforcer for a mob in Chicago, right in the 1930s. And so there's a lot of great aspects, I think, to this movie. One just being obviously about a father and son on the run from the mob. And then, of course, you have obviously the Daniel Craig and Paul Newman father and son dynamics in that film that make it extremely complicated. But really what also is a big driving force of this film, too, is the relationship between Hanks's Michael Sullivan character in this film and John Rooney, played by Paul Newman, and that there is a father and son attachment that these two have, as in that Michael is the son, essentially, that John has always wanted, that Connor, played by Daniel Craig, is not, because Connor is a buffoon, and Connor is reckless, and Michael is very much the kind of person you would want to have by your side when you're making these decisions. And so as I watched the film over the last year and really have thought about it too, when I've thought about just what a different kind of performance it is for Tom Hanks, who is always playing America's dad, who's always playing the good guy, to really play a morally ambiguous sort of character, and having his son alongside of him here, and having to see the brutality of this man who is essentially a gun for hire, a murderer, having to defend it. And their relationship too is not rocky. He does not have a relationship at the beginning of this film with his son, Michael Jr. It's because he's always working, and his wife is always there for him. And his sons, of course, early in the film are murdered, and his wife too, by Daniel Craig. And so it's very much this, cat and mouse game. And you have like Jude Law in there, who's really great, but really it just boils down to, by the end of the film, when the rubber meets the road, and you have Paul Newman there in the chapel, and when Hanks's head comes up, it's in the fear and the sadness that Rooney has in his eyes. It's that he knows that his time is up, because he's seen this done dozens of times, but he knows how much that Michael has been betrayed, and knows that there's nothing he can do to stop it. And it's devastating. It's one of just the best depictions of growth within a father and son, as well as the downfall of many father-son relationships and adopted father-son relationships through business and whatnot as well too. So I really like this movie, and I think it's layered in a lot of just this great graphic novel and this wonderful script. But I don't think Mendes has ever been able to capture just emotionality and complex, emotionality since in a lot of his films.
I think Skyfall comes close, and
I think Skyfall does a little bit, but that's not why I love that film. I don't love it because of its, emotional core to it. I love it because it's a James Bond movie at the end of the day. I think that this one's more just enriched with characters that, I am deeply invested in. And so, my number 5.
You make a great point about Tom Hanks's performance, because he is known for playing America's dad, and in many ways, the character
he's played Mr. Rogers, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, but in many ways, the character he's playing here on the page could almost be that exact blueprint, and yet the performance really isn't that. It's almost like a deconstruction of his usual, I guess, trope in some ways, and I love it for those reasons. This is at least top 3 Sam Mendes for me. I think it is a very good film, and I knew you'd have it in your list, which is why it's an honorable mention of mine.
An honorable mention for me as well. I mean, I do agree with you. Obviously, such a huge swerve for Tom Hanks, especially at that point in his career, and that's what makes that performance interesting more than anything else. So a great pick there, Ryan. For my number 5, it is very easy, at least in my opinion, to get caught up in a film that we've covered on a movie series, Ryan and myself, on past podcasts, and just kind of remember those more specifically, because we've talked about them so in depth, and they kind of mean more to us when you do talk about them for an hour or however long you do talk about them.
Yeah, for sure.
So my number 5 is a film that we covered on a movie series. it features one of the best performances by one of the best actors of all time. And I want to know, Ryan, can you guess what it is?
I think it's that poster right behind you, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe. Is it Speed Racer?
No.
No? Okay.
It is, although not a bad one. But
not a bad choice for you.
No.
You know what I mean?
Actually, didn't even think about that one. But
yeah, John Goodman's performance is really good in the film.
All of a sudden, Jay's like, wait a minute. I changed my list.
But no, although I guess you were saying Goodman, one of the best performances by one of the best actors. But no, the answer is He Got Game, Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
Very explicitly a father-son film.
Yes.
And you have Denzel as this father who is torn between his desire to do what's best for his son and his desire to do what's best for himself.
Mm-hmm.
And Denzel is at maybe his most flamboyant and big in this film, and it works so well. If you want to see Denzel go full Denzel, watch He Got Game. He is giving a master class of a big performance that also contains a great amount of nuance. So much nuance and impact that it cancels out the maybe not quite as great performance from Ray Allen in the film, who
he's
is
fine. I think
maybe
he's fine.
he is fine is the extent of it. That's what I would say.
That's a good
definition.
It could have been a heck of a lot worse.
Yes, it could have. As far as a professional athlete goes, I'm sure there were many worse options.
Shaq and Shazam comes to mind. Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Yeah, but this is a film that really does capture this extremely complicated father-son relationship. You have Denzel, who is tasked with getting his son to go to a particular college in order to get out of prison. And as he kind of gets closer to his son, he starts to become ever so slightly torn between what his son actually genuinely wants and his own selfish desires. But inherently, naturally, understandably almost, of course he wants to get out of prison.
Yeah.
That's an enormous deal. It is, you would do just about anything to get your freedom back in that way. And so as big and boisterous as Denzel is in that film, he really captures that desperation so well, which makes that relationship so much more complex. Not to mention, there's an argument that maybe the greatest father-son scene of all time is Denzel and Ray Allen playing pickup basketball in just one of the most tense, engaging sports scenes ever made. It is such a masterclass from Denzel, who is, I mean, that's on his film reel, greatest scenes Denzel's ever done ever, which is saying a lot. And he's really fantastic in that film, a film that I really, really like. I continue to like more the more I watch it. I think there's more to that film, which can seem a little trite at first, but I think there's a lot more there when you kind of dig into it.
Yeah, there's something about it that lingers with you, and maybe it's just because the emotional core of it is so universal. You know, the reasons that you're talking about there, Jade. It's I feel like anyone who has now become a parent can relate to this movie in some way. You can, it paints with enough broad strokes that you can overlook the cultural situation at hand, the basketball situation at hand, most specifically. It's not really about those things, even though it is still technically a sports movie in its own right. But there is so much more underneath that it really does linger with you. I think it's one of Spike Lee's most emotionally sneaky films, I guess. And I really like it too. It's hard to say it's one of his very best, but I think it's one of his purest, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Jay. I mean, like when we talked about it, I just remember us having that conversation because it's more than just about a basketball movie. It's a movie about ultimate forgiveness and trying to move on from this tragedy that has really got them all into this predicament anyway, which is this argument that happens in Jesus's house, and that's how he loses his mom, and his father really goes to prison, and there is a lot of regret. And there's a lot of just anger on both sides of it, and there's really not a lot of a leeway, obviously, between the two of them in terms of real forgiveness. Because, as you're mentioning, Denzel is essentially doing this still for selfish reasons. He wants out of prison. He doesn't, and he's doing this deal so that the warden can have his son go essentially to this state school, and not thinking about his son. And then by the end of it, when his son is finally beating him down at a game in which his father has emotionally and physically abused him on that basketball court. And he's at his lowest. He finally realizes at that moment that, like, it's not about me. It's not about even me getting out of prison or whatnot. It is about what is best for Jesus, what is best for his family. And even if the deal is pulled out from under him, it doesn't matter. And I really think Denzel Washington's performance, I mean, I say this all the time, Denzel Washington gets the best performances when he works with Spike Lee, and vice versa. The best films
Good
that
actor.
Spike Lee gets.
Good at his job.
Like, you know, they're both
actor.
they just work so well together. And you're right, Jay, there's
Right.
a lot of stuff that's over the top when it comes to that film, but it all is blended because of this grounded foundation between these two characters.
Yeah. And it's a good movie, and it's a great transition point to my number 5, which is also a sports-related movie, more directly a sports movie than He Got Game is. And I have this at number 5 mostly because on a true list, it might not be in my top 5. It's a bit of a newer film, and I think we need to sit with it for a longer period of time. But this film, as well as its surrounding films in its respective franchise, are very top of mind right now. I'm going with Creed 2 for my number 5.
I knew this was going to be on your list. See, this is when I knew it was going to be
specifically Creed. I mean, I feel like all of the Creed films have an underlying theme of fatherhood in some way, because the ghost of Apollo Creed lingers in all of these movies. But I feel like that's most emblematic in Creed 2, which is, when I first saw that movie in 2018, not only was I surprised by how much it affected me, but I thought this movie should be like a new Father's Day tradition. And because the Rocky franchise is sort of known as being like a dad franchise, dads tend to love these movies, but Creed 2 is very literally about that in some ways. And you can look at it from the perspective of Adonis and the ghost of his father, Apollo, lingering so heavily. I mean, it's the closest that the franchise really came to feeling like a ghost story. And it kind of, deconstructs that a little bit, but it's really the relationship with Dolph Lundgren and his son that creates those parallels even further. And Dolph Lundgren gives a surprisingly great performance in Creed 2, and yet another deconstruction of the machismo that the franchise came to represent, especially in Rocky 4, which is the direct tie-in to this movie. So it is top of mind. I don't need to talk about it too much with Creed 3 still playing in theaters, but the more I sit on Creed 2, I'm never going to say I like it more than Ryan Coogler's first film, but there are days I want to watch it more often than Coogler's original film. There's an emotional prowess to it, especially when you get to the end and how that relates to Rocky himself and his son. Like it's the most that this franchise felt like it came full circle in its own movie. And I love the way it just feels so conclusive in that regard. So Creed 2, good movie, underrated movie, very good movie.
Yeah, good
I
stuff.
agree. I mean, Dolph gives a really powerful performance and not a lot of time in that film. And that movie is so interesting because it does require the most buy-in, because it is most related to the goofiest movie in the entire franchise.
Yep.
But he really sells the raw emotion, the bruising to his ego that movie did to him.
Yeah.
It's a really, really good performance from him. And obviously the entire Creed franchise, it is about Adonis's relationship to the father that he never really had, and kind of the surrogate fatherhood that Rocky provides in this particular period of his life. So a great choice.
And in this case becomes about fathers who try to fix their mistakes through their sons with regard to Dolph. And I think that's a very powerful notion as well. Very good movie. I really love this one. Let's keep the list going. So Ryan, what's your number 4 pick?
Well, my number 4 pick, I mean, if you're going to do a movie about fatherhood, if you're going to do a movie about maybe parents, no filmmaker comes close and topical of mind as of right now than Steven Spielberg, right? And you could go the Fablemans. That's just the more recent bit you could go with. You could go with something older, but for me, I'm going to go with a movie that you guys, both of you were on last year and talked about.
Ooh,
and
great film.
I'm going to go with
Love it.
Catch Me If You Can at my number 4. And the reason why about this film is because when I think back to it, obviously I think back to Catch Me If You Can, of seeing it around, in the year 2002, and my parents had just recently had gone through a divorce a couple of years earlier, and seeing that scene, obviously, at Christmas with Frank, right there at the window, and talking to the little girl who was essentially his stepsister, and saying, "Who's your mommy?" and all that stuff there. But really, what really catalysts that and kind of catapults that whole thing is Christopher Walken, and Frank Abagnale Sr. and his interactions with him throughout the film, because that's really where a lot of Frank's wildness and his imagination, and obviously what gets him in trouble with the FBI, and his scams, he gets a lot from his father, and he gets a lot of it from this idea of wanting to fix something that his father essentially broke, which is losing, his wife, and losing the interest of the woman that he loves, and being a con man essentially. And I think about the scene with him where are you going to go tonight, Frank? Where, everybody in here, they're looking at you, and my son, the pilot, and it's all within this mirage of what his father really is.
It's all going for his dad.
Exactly. And everything he does is for his dad.
Yep.
Because he's trying to get the thing that his father lost.
Right.
And at the same token, though, you have Carl, who is a abysmal father, because he's chasing Frank. Is this guy that doesn't see his kids. And essentially through these two guys, one being vastly older than the other, there becomes this bond of this case that by the end of the film, it does turn into almost a surrogate father for Frank at the end. And so this movie is wrapped within just so much of the mistakes of fathers and children, and at least in this case, Frank Abagnale Jr., played by Leonardo DiCaprio, trying to fix a lot of that. And sometimes things just remain broken, and there is no fixing it. There is no magic moment or magic scene or magic check or amount of dollars that can fix it. It's just going to be that way, because that's how life is. And it's a beautiful notion by Spielberg, which I think that really Catch Me If You Can and E.T. are like the perfect 1-2 punch to go into something like The Fabelmans a lot. And
I can see that.
A lot of movies about divorce.
Yeah, he
that
really
guy. Clearly something he has clung on to.
Maybe maybe something he should tackle. Maybe I don't know. You guys, I didn't know. Hey guys, divorce is traumatic. I don't know if that affected Steven Spielberg or not. But no, I think that this for me is the best that Spielberg's ever tackled that, and tackled essentially just drama about people struggling with divorce and the ramifications of moving on from that. And plus, it's just one of the most entertaining films ever. But and you can get wrapped up in the chase, but really, when you look at it on the nuance, it's a devastating portrait of fatherhood. So I had to pick
top five Spielberg, if you ask me. And I think
top three, if you ask me.
Top three for me as well.
Yeah, I think we all said at least top five, maybe even top three, when myself, Jay, as well as Mitchell Beaupre, we all reviewed it on that specific series episode. We all love that film, and I think it's great. Yeah, another honorable mention of mine. There are a few Spielberg films you can consider for this list. But that is certainly one of them.
I mean,
Last Crusade, War of the Worlds.
Well, I'll say this now. The film I almost chose to include but didn't was Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is very much about fatherly abandonment. So it's a certain...
Yes, a lot of them are about the absence of fathers.
Yeah, if you really wanted to dissect it, you could probably do also Jaws if you wanted to. You know what I mean? There's, there's a little bit of like, the father saving, the whole family and the town and everything. And that's, his idea of a perfect family. Even Lincoln is a film that you could talk about too, about fatherhood and
good point,
because literally the father of America. You know what I mean? So there's a lot, but I felt that is just the most appropriate one of all of them.
It's a great one.
A film I love dearly. Funnily enough, Frank Abagnale Jr. in the news this week, as apparently he lied about everything.
Apparently his biggest con was the fact that he was a con man.
The long con, the longest con of all.
You hear that and then you go like, but it's also he's dealing with the government, so it's like you don't know what to believe when it comes to all that. I don't know. It's an old
Frank Abagnale Jr., unreliable narrator?
Maybe we should watch that movie again.
Moral of all of this.
A great pick there, a movie I love, and that leads us to my number 4, which is going to be a film by one of the children of one of the most famous directors of all time.
A Nepo baby?
Nepo baby, but a very talented one. Sofia Coppola and her film Somewhere. Another film about bad dads. So you'll notice a theme here again. That maybe it's insecurity creeping in. Y'all are all very hopeful about the ease of fatherhood, and meanwhile, I'm exposing my insecurity about my future.
At least you're acknowledging the insecurity of it. It's not like you're saying this represents what I want to be like as a dad,
right?
And that's good. It's good.
Otherwise, we would definitely be worried about Jet at this point.
Well, it is that Tree of Life thing where the implication of Tree of Life. I mean, that whole movie really is about what a bad father can do to a family, in one way or another, and that's also kind of what Somewhere is about as well. It is a film about this kind of washed up absentee father who is tasked with watching his daughter, who he really kind of barely knows, played by Elle Fanning, brilliantly played by Elle Fanning in that film. And it is just such a funny film, a darkly funny film, and to me really a very clever film, a very deep film, very nuanced film, just about how a person's personal life and a person's personal strife can interfere with the things that they know that they should care most about. And that is something that I find pretty profound, is just this idea that I want to love this person so much, but I can't get there. It's a really hard thing to kind of wrap your head around, but I think Sofia Coppola does a great job of that. And it might be because she grew up in a family with a very, very famous Hollywood person who perhaps at times was distracted by the fame and notoriety that he brought upon himself with his extraordinary talent. And I think Sofia Coppola is really kind of exposing what is so brilliant about Sofia Coppola, I think, is that she really leans into her own upbringing with so many of her films, where it's like, yes, I had this incredible privilege, but I also need you to understand that with that privilege comes this great deal of attention that my parents had to pay to things that weren't me or my siblings.
Right.
And it is just a really, it feels very genuine to me. And Sofia Coppola is just a very genuine filmmaker in general, but here, especially in this very short film that is in many ways about nothing, it ends up being kind of about everything. And that's what I love so much about it.
Yeah, I love movies that are about nothing that become about everything, as you say. I feel like that's like another subgenre of movies that we tend to love. Movies about nothing that become about everything, and I think this is a great example of it. Maybe her most underrated film, most underappreciated film, I guess.
I would say so. I bet if you ask even moderate cinephiles, like, have you seen Somewhere? They might be like, I don't know, what's that?
Never heard of it. Yeah. Yeah, but I do think it's a very good film. It's one I do want to rewatch, and maybe a rewatch would have put it on this list. But I do think it is very good for those reasons that you're talking about. As far as my number 4, I'm going to go with a more obvious, I guess, classic example. In fact, I've got quite a few that might fall into the category of classic, obvious examples. But from my number 4, I'm going to the year 1962 to the film To Kill a Mockingbird. Directed by Robert Mulligan. Yep. This is obviously based on the classic novel by Harper Lee, which I've also read and love, but I love the movie for different reasons, as it taps into more of the childhood innocence of that story, as opposed to the more social side of Harper Lee's original novel. And of course, the father in question here is Atticus Finch, played by Gregory Peck, who has sort of become like the blueprint of great cinematic father figures in many ways. Like, I mean, he's one who represents nothing but honesty and a willingness to listen to other people, which are obviously great traits. And, we often talk about great parental figures as flawed individuals. Sometimes that's something we like to look for in not just parents, but just movie characters in general, because it gives them an arc, it gives them nuance, it gives them complexities. Atticus Finch is kind of flawless in many ways, like in a way that's kind of a criticism. Like, to other movies, I feel like that would be a major problem. Like, he's almost too perfect of a person. But here, I think that's what makes him such a great father figure, because of what he represents and how he literally leads by example, and what Scout learns in the process. Scout and Jem specifically learn in that process. I mean, Atticus Finch doesn't really have much of an arc in this movie, if at all, but it's the morals that he represents. And for those morals alone, I think he needs to be discussed in the echelon of fatherhood movies, which is why I'm picking it here. I think it's a very good film in its own right too, but as a positive father figure, I don't think you get much more positive than this, which is why I'm picking it.
Yeah.
This is a film I need to rewatch desperately. I don't think I've seen it since high school.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did you read the novel with it as well?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And that was the trouble for me, is I love that novel, and I think it's one of the great American novels ever written. And then I watched the film and I went, oh, I don't like this.
Well,
I remember liking the movie a lot, but I just haven't watched it.
I don't know how it was for you, and this is obviously not representative of every high school reading or English class, right? But at least where I went to school, it was sort of common to do that same thing. We would read the novel and then see the movie that it was based on, the classic movie that it was based on, and the lesson was really to teach us why the movie wasn't good. Like, that was always the message in many ways. And,
for sure.
And I even loved movies as a high schooler, so I always pushed back saying, like, yeah, I love the book, but I love this movie for its own reasons, and my teacher would flunk me for that. But I don't know if it was the same for you guys in that regard.
I mean, Brendan, I will say this, is that there's two incidences of that in my life where we read a book, the book was very good, the book I really loved, and then I saw the movie in high school and I just absolutely was like, what is this and why am I watching it? And that was this film, and then The Grapes of Wrath. And then a couple of years ago, I saw The Grapes of Wrath just on itself without having the novel and everything. And I ended up was like, oh, I'm a fool. I really love this movie. And so it's just been a long time since I've sat down in here, and watched this. Plus, there's also like, I think Aaron Sorkin has recreated it for like a stage play, and maybe one day he'll make it into a remake.
Very well.
I think Jeff Daniels was.
Yeah, it was Atticus Finch on Broadway. So it makes total sense. Choice. Yeah. Oh no. Yeah, I really want to see that film, but obviously, it's a classic and one that, like Jay, I need to rewatch. It's been like 15 years probably since.
If I can offer a counterpoint to your experience in English class in high school, a kind of perception altering experience I had in high school was we read the Odyssey, and then my teacher showed us
television series.
Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou?
And it kind of it a little bit turned into like a film appreciation class where it was like,
sounds like it rocked your world.
Can do to adapt this, loosely adapt it, obviously, but adapt it into a different medium in a completely original way. So that was a big deal for me when we did that in English class. It was awesome.
I think there's a time and place for both kinds of adaptations, ones that are more faithful, ones that are looser in that regard. My experience, they never got to those examples that you're talking about, Jay. I would have loved to see something like that.
Brendan, you would have loved during Grapes of Wrath when we were doing that in high school. One day my English professor or my English teacher, he played the album by Bruce Springsteen, The Ghost of Tom Joad.
Oh,
we dissected the connections from the novel in different songs in the album to the novel and everything, and that was like a couple days assignment too. You would have loved that. That would have just been like right up your alley.
Yeah, now tying music into the whole category. Yeah, that's great. Oh man, we're getting on another rabbit hole. Look what you guys are doing to me. You're pulling me down the hole. I can't.
But you kind of want to go do that stuff now, don't you?
Kind of did.
In the only film class I took in college, we had to rescore Casablanca.
What?
Yeah, the assignment was, you have they gave you 12 checkpoints, and you had to pick a song to replace the score that they had in the film, and it was really fun. I put in like Arctic Monkeys in one sequence and Radiohead in another sequence.
I was gonna say, I know you're a Radiohead fan. I'm sure you would have put Radiohead in.
I mean,
somewhere.
obviously,
I put
All-Star
in
by Smash Mouth made it in there. You know what I mean?
I put in Videotape, the Radiohead song Videotape.
Oh yeah,
when
Rainbows. Yeah,
when Humphrey Bogart is quietly reflecting on his past relationship, which I thought was a very good choice.
It's interesting,
on my part.
yeah, because my first thought would have been to go to the album In Rainbows if I were to do something like that, and then maybe in like a more mystery related movie, I would have picked Jigsaw Falling Into Place.
Yeah. However, the feedback I got was because I said, "Oh, it's a very beautiful song," and then the feedback I got from my professor was like, "What does that mean? Tell me why it's beautiful. You can't just say it's beautiful. That's nonsense." And I was like, "You know what? That's fair. I don't really know how to talk about music. That's what I learned when I did that assignment." I was like, "I feel like this would be great, but I don't really know why."
Gentlemen, serious question for y'all. Pro or anti-coffee?
Man, pro coffee.
Huge
If you're
pro.
Yeah, you got to be pro coffee. Like if you're at a certain age, our age, 30 years old, you got to be pro coffee. Like,
And tying into the episode, fatherhood, that's coffee time, baby. All
oh
right?
yeah, that's double coffee. That's like a double espresso shot to the heart.
You got a not tired baby. That makes me tired. So then you wake up late at night or very early in the morning. You got to stay awake with this baby who's crying all night. Get yourself some coffee, watch a flick. Then your wife wakes up, takes over in the morning. Then you get your sleep back in. So, there's a whole strategy here that we can talk about when y'all have kids.
Which was going to lead to my second question, asking if y'all were pro or anti-coffee. Silly question or very silly question?
No, like the most serious question you can actually ask us. Like that's as personal of a question as they'll ever get in the InSession film world. Is
Absolutely. We are all coffee drinkers here. And if you actually love the taste of coffee and you really value the art of making coffee and what it actually means, then you need to consider ordering from Coffee Cult, which sources only specialty grade Arabica coffee beans from over 50 countries around the world. They inspect each bean and only select the highest grade. So if you're someone that actually loves the quality of your coffee, this service is unmatched. And they also go out of their way to source coffee from farms that actually pay their workers very well, especially women. They roast to order. So for those of us that actually love the taste of coffee, you're not going to get stale coffee. None of that Folgers stuff that you buy at the drugstore. It's not about that. You get it shipped right to your door, and it is delicious coffee. It has not been sitting around for weeks or even days. It's not loaded with those preservatives that a lot of them tend to have. It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
Coffee Cult, clean beans is the name of the game.
Yes.
Because like the Folgers, the big companies, what I'll tell you is a lot of those companies don't clean their beans. If you don't have any clean beans, then you're going to have some creepy crawly friends that might be in those Folgers or Maxwell House. But not at Cold Coffee, all right? Theirs is pure, clean beans. Yeah. They taste delicious, but light, dark, medium roast. There's all the different kinds of flavors too, Brendan.
And the way you said that, all I heard was Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall. How can you have any coffee if you don't clean your beans?
Exactly. You got to clean your beans. It's what I learned in college in my Latin American studies classes is that the more independent coffee houses, they have to clean their beans as opposed to the mass producers.
You can call me Michael Clark Duncan in the Green Mile because my last name should be Coffee. All right. And that's just really what it comes down to. And because of that, you can guarantee that I know my coffee, and I'm a coffee cult boy. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So check it out. Genuinely great coffee. Love it. All day.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Go to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K and also cult with a K. Coffeecult.com to get 15% off your order if you use the code ISF. Once again, 15% off your order from coffeecult.com. Use the code ISF. We absolutely recommend it. With that out of the way, let's get to our number 3 movies about fatherhood. So, Ryan, what do you have at number 3?
This might be the best father I have on the list.
We'll see.
And so, judge listeners what they judge these 5 fathers that I'm picking here.
It's the judge.
Yes, I'm picking Robert Duvall and the judge. No, I'm going to John Singleton's classic film Boys in the Hood here at my number 3.
Yeah, good choice,
I'm talking
good
about
choice.
Furious Styles, who I think is just going back and watching the clips here. One, Lawrence Fishburne is absolutely amazing in this performance. I mean, Lawrence Fishburne, one of our great actors that we have, period, on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a movie. This is a movie. It's following these 3 friends in Crenshaw in Los Angeles, in what is modern day 1990s. But Furious is not like the environment that they are surrounded by. He is trying to raise Trey to get out of this systematic oppression. And he is doing it in any which way he can because, Trey's mom, Reva, played by Angela Bassett, is absent a lot in their life. She has decided to move on and really is a parent by convenience is the best way to describe her and their interactions in the film, or at least their one interaction at the coffee shop between her and Furious. But
yeah,
the lessons about gentrification, the lessons about the violence that is going around in this environment is monumental for Trey's upbringing. And Cuba Gooding Jr. is fantastic in his scenes opposite, but he's really kind of sitting there and taking in all this vital information that Singleton's wrote on the page and Fishburne is delivering perfectly, as the fact that the only way to learn to get out is to understand the systematic oppressions within your day-to-day life. And if you fall into the trappings of what society, specifically white society, wants and thinks that a black person should be, then by all means, you can fall into those traps and you can be just like every friend that will be selling drugs and going to prison and continuing the cycle that we never consider to get out of. But he has a chance through his father's teaching to understand that he can have a better life than what he has. And that's ultimately what any parent wants. Me not being a parent, just knowing that that's what every parent wants is essential to, if you want to be a parent, is that you want a better life than you have right now for your child in the future. And that, I think, is perfectly shown in this movie I mean, John Singleton, I think we covered it on Extra Film. I think even you guys talked about it a little bit too, Brendan, a couple of years ago after his passing.
Yeah.
And he never got to truly get back to, I mean, he made some decent films in between, or some that you might review more than others.
When he made that movie.
But I mean,
crazy.
For a debut,
he's made a lot of interesting
wild
movies. Like Baby Boy, I actually think is a really interesting movie. What year was that? 2000? 2001, I think it was.
What's it called? Rosewood?
Yeah.
Oh,
like
yeah. With Ving Rhames and who else was in it? Was John Voight
Don
in that?
Cheadle?
Yeah. Yeah. I like Four Brothers, but I know I'm like in the minority there.
That's when he got a little pulpier.
A little pulpy. I like the pulp, a little pulp in your juice isn't a bad thing. And then of course he made like the worst Fast and Furious movie, but that's beside the point.
No, Too Fast and Furious is good, but he did make that god awful Taylor Lautner movie.
Oh yeah. What was that? Untraced or whatever the heck it was.
Abducted. What the heck was it called?
Abducted, something along those lines. But anyway,
I think it was. Was it Abducted? No, it wasn't. I don't think so.
I need to know this now.
I need to know this now.
Abduction.
Abduction. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a tough way to go out, John.
It's a tough. Yeah. Well, he kind of did a lot of television before he passed and everything. But
but even his version of Shaft wasn't that bad. I thought it was pretty.
I mean, it's not it's not as bad as the new one, but that's not saying much. But I will say this is one of the great directorial debuts of like all time, and it has this just at the core of it, this relationship between a father and son, and just wanting the idea of wanting something better for your child is what drives every action, I think, going forward throughout this film. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
I think he's still the youngest director nominated for Best Director.
I think so. I don't know if Chazelle's passed him. It might.
I think Chazelle was the youngest to win.
The youngest winner, but not the youngest nominee. So you might be right.
Yeah, you might be.
Pretty amazing accomplishment for as young as he was at the time.
Yeah,
great pick there for my number 3. I am realizing now that I said I have mostly anxious, scared depictions of fatherhood. They all are. So my number 3 is a man who captures internal anxieties better than maybe any director ever, David Lynch. And it is Eraserhead, a film very much about the horror of giving birth or being responsible for a new being on Earth. And it is so horrifying to Lynch at this point in his life that he portrays the new child as essentially an alien, a scary looking entity who the main character in the film, Henry Spencer, has to really kind of overcome not just those anxieties of having a newborn child, but the fear he has just looking at this being who is oozing juices and crying constantly. When you see this being who looks like, an early version of E.T. really is what it looks like. And you see him kind of oozing this pus and giving off these human-like screams and cries in the film. It is really unsettling, as the entire film is. And Jack Nance, who gives an incredible performance as Henry Spencer, as the Eraserhead, really gives you that sense of unease and fear, not just of the child, but throughout the entire film. His entire environment, really, he has this sense of desperation and this loneliness that comes with his existence, especially in these moments where his girlfriend has left him because she is uncomfortable with this entity being brought into their lives. She's horrified by the notion of taking care of this thing. And so it is on Henry's shoulders to bear the burden of this child. And it really does turn into this surreal horror film that is so, I mean, David Lynch is so good at capturing real emotion with very surreal imagery and ideas. And this is a very, very early version of that. So if you want to know what it's like to have a newborn child, it's kind of like Eraserhead, if that makes you feel any better. So just this thing that seems completely foreign and that you now feel responsible for, but have no understanding of how to really take care of it at first. It's wild. So good job, David Lynch.
Yeah, and the way you talk about it, you add this like weird dark sense of humor in your description, and the movie kind of has that in its own way too. Like to say the movie's kind of funny, or at least creepily funny, I don't think is far fetched, which is so interesting.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, like it's. I think it might be one of David Lynch's best films as far as tonal balancing. I think in a way, it's almost like the David Lynch buffet before he had any other meals to pull from, and it's so interesting in that regard.
Yeah, I just recently watched this at South by Southwest. It was playing in the bar before we went and saw the new Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Drink a gin and tonic and watch Eraserhead with my.
It was more
buddies.
of an old fashioned in Eraserhead, but I was glued. Everybody was talking, and I'm just like looking at the screen, going, "Guys, Eraserhead's on the screen. You should kind of watch this. This is a great movie." So, no,
I'm just picturing you like Michael Shannon watching the Oscars at the bar. Remember that image that was going
that's
viral?
exactly how the hell I was. But no, honestly, anytime that Jay gets to mention David Lynch or we get to mention David Lynch, I always have to just thank Jay for getting me to rip off that cinematic Band-Aid and get to explore one of the great directors of all time and movies that I just absolutely love. And that one is another debut that is just a wild, ambitious debut that you just fall right in love with.
Yeah. From one movie series to yet another movie series that we did on the main show a long time ago. And I'm going with that for my number 3 pick. A long time ago, JD and I did a movie series on Italian neorealism movies. So in this case, I'm going to go to the 1948 film Bicycle Thieves from Vittorio De Sica. I feel like there's a theme kind of going here between the three of us and the types of movies that we gravitate towards, especially with the topic of parenthood. And in many ways, it kind of speaks to our overall ethos that we bring to our love of movies. And I'm sort of continuing that here with Bicycle Thieves, which is a classic of the Italian neorealism movement, which often utilized real people as opposed to actors. And in this case, it was Lamberto Maggiorani as the central Antonio. I believe I'm pronouncing that name right. And then there's his son Bruno, played by Enzio Staiola, actually. And I believe both of them were obviously not real actors. They were real people, but Maggiorani, I think, was a factory fitter. And then Staiola was simply spotted at random through a crowd of children and was then selected for this role as they were already shooting the movie, I think. And I think he was sort of picked up after the fact. And because of that realism, I think it's one of the best examples that depicts a father's dedication and desperation to his family. And I think it's done so in such palpable ways. I'm not sure if you guys have seen this movie. But it is a really interesting, almost documentary-like depiction of family, and it feels earnest because it doesn't feel like a movie, and yet it somehow feels even more cinematic than other movies that came out in the late 40s. Like it's such an interesting thing, and I think it is a beautiful movie. So the simplicity of it, I think, is why it works so well. It's simply about a father trying to get his bicycle back because he needs it for his job. That's all it is. And it's a job that's meant to support this family that is on the fringes, and his son goes with him, tags along with him on this adventure of sorts to find this bicycle. And it's one of the best adventure films of the 1940s. So Bicycle Thieves, if you haven't seen it, good movie. Good movie.
We need to do a top 5 most embarrassing blind spots list, because this is up there.
I feel like that would be a good episode.
That'd be
that
pretty
would
fun.
be. That would be a good topic.
But no shaming us, listeners. You know what I mean?
No. I mean, we all have them. That's the point of
that.
this.
That would be fun. Maybe we'll do that when there's a down week here with some new releases. But a blind spot for me, unfortunately, one I really, really need to check out. But I mean, everybody speaks up for it, so I'll take your word for it for sure.
It's really good.
It's great. Yeah, I love that movie.
All right, Ryan, what is your number 2 movie about fatherhood?
All right. So my number 2 is, it does have a father-son relationship in it. It also has a father with their child or their children. And I really think that this movie, and my number two, is really about legacy. What a father's legacy does,
Tron.
what their legacy is, and now not a Tron legacy,
Okay.
and how that legacy is not even just beyond what you do as a parent, but what you do on the whole. And so, as a person, and it's one of Jay's favorite films of all time. It's one that I just recently fell in love with. And I'm going with Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life.
Nice.
I think that It's a Wonderful Life, the more I think about it outside the context of a holiday film, which it's barely a holiday film, is this idea of George Bailey and really the sense of what he gave up in that movie in order to be the man that entire town needed to be. And it's the conversation early on with his father at the table. And you see George just go on and on about how he's leaving this small town. He's got visions of a grand idea and grand vision beyond the borders of this small town. And his father is just sitting there smiling and basically just telling him that sounds great, but also this place is just as good as any of those ideas can be. And it's not until his father passes does he see how desperate this town needs a person like George Bailey, like he needed his father, to really coexist and to really, stay alive and not be corrupted by Potter and the bank and essentially every bad deed that can go into someone's brain. And then, of course, when Clarence comes into the fold and shows him the life of what it's like without George there specifically, you then see not only does everyone change, but there is one key ingredient that I have been thinking about, and it makes It's a Wonderful Life almost like a horror film by the end of it. It's the fact that Mary essentially never, leaves, and she becomes a librarian and she doesn't know who he is, but everybody still exists. They may be like corrupted, or they may be more like a sinister or evil or changed version of themselves. But the number one thing that doesn't exist is their children. George never becomes a father. He never has a room of those children who, they may get annoying. He might have to talk to the teacher on the phone and he gets frustrated with everything that he has to do in fighting Potter for this town. But those children don't exist. And the minute that George flips back into a reality and he runs home, what's the first thing he finds there? He finds his children and he holds them tightly. And I think that for a parent, the idea of losing a child is the number one thing that scares them. And it would be the number one thing that they regret if they had to change their lives, is losing a child. And this is losing children. And you can see that in Jimmy Stewart's performance there, is that this man is realizing that I do have it really, really, really well off, because I have these things that are going to carry on my legacy long more than just the idea and the identity of what I can do for the people in this town. It's these kids that are driving me nuts, and yet I can't think of a world without them, because I've seen a world without them, and it's cruel and it's unusual and it's a sense of punishment. And I think that by the end, when his youngest sort of shows him about the bell and Clarence, he holds her. You see her, you see Stewart just kind of pick up the kid there for a little second. He goes, "That's right." And when he says that, "Attaboy, Clarence," it brings new meanings when you start thinking about it through the contextuality of him being also a father, more than just him being the savior of this town. So, It's a Wonderful Life. It's a movie that has carried on so many meetings since Jay and I have resaw it over the holidays.
One of the great wins of this podcast was getting Ryan on board.
I was going to ask because Ryan,
he was very much not into it.
Yeah,
no, I saw it at a really
ago.
young age, and I think that movie is not designed for the young. I really do think that movie is designed for a more mature audience.
It's designed
somebody
for
that has
the
lived a little bit of a life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, and that movie hit me like a ton of bricks. And every time I think about it, I start thinking about, good Lord, am I going to start crying on a podcast? Because it's such a beautiful movie, and it's also really hopeful. And I don't want to do it because I don't want to be Jay. But it's that magic that we talk about with Frank Capra, who is a magician of, and this is a nice compliment to say, but audience manipulation And most films are audience, you can manipulate an audience. And I think he knows how to do it the best. And with this movie in particular, there's so many goddamn layers to that film.
Yeah.
But I think that one in particular is something that I carry with me when thinking about it.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I honestly didn't even think about it for this list, but you actually make a really good case for it. So it's an instant honorable mention of mine. I do love this film quite a bit, and I'm so glad to hear you're on the train. It's a wonderful feeling, a wonderful life to live that you're part of this now, Ryan.
Yeah. I'm on that train in Big Jim. It's a great time to be alive.
All about growth.
A masterpiece. It's a Wonderful Life, and that's a film. To Brendan's point, it's a film about a lot of stuff. But certainly fatherhood is one of the things that it's about. And that will bring me to my number 2, which is a film that's about a lot of stuff and also about fatherhood. And I spoke a little bit too soon. I do have one really good dad on my list, and that, of course, is Jack Torrance in The Shining.
I knew that.
a very reasonable, level-headed dad who
never did anything wrong.
The Shining is my number 2, continuing my descent into darkness. That is my top 5 films about fatherhood. And this is a film that is about a lot of things. It's about substance abuse. It's about writer's block, creativity. It's a film about isolation. And it's also a film about fatherhood, because what is the most evil thing that arguably that Jack Torrance does in this film? It is chase his son through a snowy labyrinth with an axe, trying to murder him.
Yeah.
It is extraordinarily compelling in this very, very heightened way. And from the very beginning, it is made clear that really the reason they're going to the Overlook Hotel in the first place is because he lashed out and hit his son because of his substance abuse issues. So they are trying to get as far away as they can from that in an effort to make sure that he is a faithful, non-abusive, quality father first and foremost. And all that other stuff, him writing the book, that really is secondary to Shelley Long's character giving him one more chance to be a father to his son. And that there is obviously this descent into madness that results in superficially these very, as far as his writing is concerned, these flourishes of not even creativity, but just the stagnation. You have him writing over and over again these pages. So that creative block, that writer's block, again manifests itself into him being a bad father and a bad husband. And that really is what leads to his ultimate demise at the end of the day, is that he is so desperate to abuse the people that he is supposed to be loving that he freezes in, again, this hedge maze outside of a hotel.
Yeah.
And it's scary. Obviously, probably one of the scariest movies ever made. It's Stanley Kubrick, so it's all very controlled. It's all purposeful. And you feel that fatherhood, the themes of fatherhood, as much as you feel any other theme in the film.
And you didn't even mention the movie may or may not be a ghost story. At least I don't know if you mentioned anything like that. And you're you're talking more about the paternal aspects of it, the more dramatic urgencies of that movie. But underneath all of that, it is a haunted maze movie of sorts, and it or it might not be. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of the movie, is that it's everything.
Let's just talk about the last shot of The Shining real quick. I mean,
do you want us to be here for 3 hours? I mean, it means everything and nothing all at the same time. But you just know that when we edit this episode, we're going to sandwich out that intro as just a 10-second video on YouTube or a short of you saying you have one good dad on your list. And
look,
of course,
Jack, he wants the best for his family.
He's not being grouchy. He just wants to finish his work. You're distracting me. I love that movie. A case can be made. It's Kubrick's best, but I feel like you can make that case for every one of his movies in a certain way.
Yeah, it really is. Maybe not for those first two.
Yeah, maybe like from Doctor Strangelove on, or even Paths of Glory. I feel like you can
Paths
maybe
of
start
Glory
there.
is a masterpiece.
Yeah, I'd say starting there is maybe where you can say anything.
Even The
past that.
Killing before that.
Killing, really good.
The Killing
maybe,
came
Yeah,
out before Paths of Glory, right?
yeah, like
Yeah, that's
Stanley Kubrick,
Influential
little too good
director.
at his job. Who
made
knows?
some
you
good
know?
movies.
I mean, a
Made some
Stanley
great movies.
Kubrick movie series is almost too obvious, you know.
Yeah. What else can we
We've-
say that already hasn't been
Yeah.
said about his movies?
Yeah, but also too, we've talked about a lot of his films, but it wouldn't also ever be a bad idea if we all did them together. Like if it was the four of us doing
Well, that's the
it.
thing.
So,
Like we talked
yeah.
about those movies a lot, but that doesn't mean we've talked about everything.
Everything.
That's. But
No,
then
'cause
again,
you
something
guys have
about these movies
done-
have been said.
Yeah, you guys have done 2001. We did The Shining.
Mhm.
4.5 hour Barry Lyndon episode.
Yeah, I'm thinking
Let's
so.
do it.
At
I think
least
it's going to
the
have to
length
be a
of the film.
commentary on the movie itself.
Oh, that would be great. We should.
Yeah.
I'm honestly.
So only
listeners
3
out
hours
there,
and 10 minutes.
let us know if you want commentaries on some films. We'll do those too.
Yeah,
Just let us
we're-
know. Drop that in the comment section if you want that.
We're not
Anyway.
opposed to that. We're not opposed to that. All right, getting back to the list of movies about fatherhood. For my number 2, I'm going to a movie that I know, Jay, you're at least somewhat mixed on. I think. I know you're not the highest on this one. Ryan, I'm actually not sure what you think about this one. But I'm going to the year 2003, Tim Burton's Big Fish for my number 2.
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, actually, Jay, we can't hear you right now. I'm not really sure what's
Yeah,
going
Jay,
on.
you want a
Oh, my
little
mic was
music,
off.
bitch.
Mixed
Oh, there we go.
positive. Mixed positive.
Okay, mixed up positive.
But I knew it was going to come up. I knew it was going to come
I
up.
figured you know me too well. After we talked about it during our 2003 retrospective, myself and JD, I think I had this at number 1, if I'm not mistaken.
Big Fish rules. I
I
don't
love
care what
this
Jay
movie.
says. I love Big Fish. Yeah,
Yep.
it was honorable mention for me. Big time.
It's a movie I'm mixed on that will make me cry every time I watch it.
Is it like the-
interesting?
Is it the last like great Tim Burton film, Brendan?
Yeah, I like
is that
Sweeney
one?
Todd. I really
I
like.
was gonna say,
Sweeney Todd.
Sweeney
okay,
Todd.
yeah, I do
Yeah.
like Sweeney Todd. Maybe that's the last one.
And I kind of like Frankenweenie as well. Like I don't love
Yeah.
it, but
Winnie's aight.
at least it still has like the Burton that we know and love before he got all CGI-ified or Disneyfied as we come to know him for now. But with Big Fish, there are days that it might be my favorite Tim Burton film, and I think it's because I still have a close relationship with my own dad. It speaks to this idea about parents wanting to, preserve their family legacies for as long as they can, which can sometimes be carried on by wild imaginations. That doesn't make the essence of those stories less true. And, between my two parents, my dad was always the bigger storyteller. He didn't embellish things the way that Edward Bloom does in this movie, but they were always very entertaining. He talked about his life on the road as a musician before he took a full-time job and became a family man, and some of the people that he interacted with. He went to Alabama and met the guitar player from Styx before he joined Styx, Tommy Shaw. So he had some of those great experiences, and he was so great at telling those stories. But it kind of reminds me, at least in broad strokes, what Big Fish is ultimately suggesting, that the story itself sometimes doesn't matter. It's the character and how it's represented and who that person was and what they're trying to preserve within this familial tie. And I think it's a beautiful movie in that regard. It's a very tender film from Tim Burton. It's one of his most sincere, at least it's sincere to me because of how I can relate to it in that way. So I do think Big Fish is great. And in the category of movies about fatherhood, it needs to come up. I mean, like, fatherhood is part of the plot. Like, that is a plot point in the movie. So it's very literal in that regard, but I do think it's a beautiful film.
That movie works because Finney is so goddamn good in that film.
I love him in the film. Yeah.
He is insanely great in that movie. And he is, yes, it is all about the unreliable narrators of the stories that we were not around for. And really what's so great about it is, like, once Finney passes away and we see that, yeah, he's told his version of the story, and usually you pass those down and they might get, more stretched out as the years go on, but the substance behind them and the connections that he has made with people there are the things that are still true within the stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
another movie that's a lot about a lot of stuff, but definitely fatherhood.
Yeah. And I just think of his stuff with Crudup, and who's also great in the film alongside Finney, like that. when he finally embraces the ideas of like opening up yourself to this sort of imagination or this style of hope, because I believe he's going to be a father. And then if I'm not mistaken, right, Brendan?
Yeah,
Like by the end they find out
that is part of it, is that he
he's-
is a soon to be dad, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's sort of the parallel nature of what this movie is getting at.
Yeah, it's great.
And then at the end of the movie,
Yeah.
they catch a big fish.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. When I first saw the movie, it was in 2003 when it first came out. I totally misinterpreted what the movie was about, because by the end, when I was a kid at that point, I was really hoping to get an answer whether Edward Bloom's stories were real or not. And as
Yeah.
I've gotten older, I realized that
Doesn't
is
matter.
not the point. That is not
Doesn't
the
matter.
point at all. And
Nope.
in fact, not knowing the truth is kind of the essence of why I think it's a beautiful film.
Yeah.
It's
Man,
learning about the nature of ambiguity. That's a big day in any
That is a
young
big-
boy's life.
Actually, you know, that'd be another great topic for a top 5 list, wouldn't it? The movies that taught us about the natures of ambiguity.
That's good. That's good.
That's
Crank high
deep.
voltage.
No, but also too, like it's you know, that movie really makes me think of the idea of taking of just in all honesty because I think that Tim Burton had made a lot of good movies about sort of parenthood or growing up or things of this nature, maturity, and I miss that kind of also visual wonder with that curiosity that he has.
It was always
behind
tangible.
the camera.
You know,
It's
like
just-
ever
it's-
since
yeah,
Alice in
it's just now
Wonderland, there was
it's-
just nothing tangible about
It's
it.
all
The ugliest
you
movie
know.
ever made.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I rewatched Sleepy Hollow the other day, and that movie is awesome. It looks
That
great.
movie's good. I like
yeah.
that movie.
Yeah, maybe a Burton series is on the horizon for us at some point. That'd be
Early
fun.
There's
Burton
not-
is
Early
great.
Burton's great. You know who I was thinking
Yeah.
about the other day
I
for a
agree.
series? I know this is very off topic and it has nothing to do with what we're about to say. I was thinking, and I told Jay this a while ago, but you know who had like a really great, it's almost in the vein of Burton, had a really great run and then just has dived into just some of the worst movies ever made, is Rob Reiner. Like Rob Reiner's like run
Yeah,
for like
he
the
hasn't
80s
made
and
a
90s. I
movie
mean,
that has made a dent in pop culture in like
exactly, but
25
man,
years.
but he owned an era. You know what I mean?
His
Of
run
cinema.
from like
Spinal Tap to
Spinal
like,
Tap to A Few
Few
Good
Good Men.
Men,
yeah, it's unmatched.
pretty
It's
great.
It's pretty.
It's like
spotless.
a Coppola-esque run almost.
Yeah,
It's
it's
pretty close,
it's
yeah.
like Burton a little bit too, where they had their vision. They kind of sort of were in their lane, making very populist sort of films with their own maybe flair to it. A little bit more Burton than
had
right.
what?
The right.
Pee-wee,
Yeah.
Pee-wee, Beetlejuice, Scissorhands, Ed Wood. Were those
Batman?
consecutive?
Batman and Batman Returns. I
Batman
think
was in
Batman
there, and
Returns is his
Batman
best
Returns.
movie.
Yeah.
I even think Mars Attacks is kind of fun.
Mars
I
Attacks
watched that movie.
is fun.
Yeah.
Ed Wood, I think, that's my favorite Burton. Ed Wood.
That's-
Ed Wood's,
might be his
yeah,
best.
that's my favorite
Yeah.
too.
I
Yeah.
think his only misstep in that like real misstep was maybe his rendition of Planet of the Apes, which doesn't
Yeah,
even
that's
feel
tough.
like
Oh,
that
that-
doesn't
yeah.
even feel like
that's a
Burton
big
film.
L there. That
Yeah.
one's
But
tough.
like, but also, you know, for every like Planet of the Apes, there's like a Sleepy Hollow that's like kind of surprised me, and I kind of dig that sort of vibe for
Yeah.
him. And
yeah, Sleepy Hollow,
his Charlie and the
slept
Chocolate,
on, unintended.
his Willy Wonka's bad, but his but then Sweeney Todd's great. So he had like at least to live like one bad and then one good, and he redeemed himself. Now it's like
It was a slow kind of it was a
Yeah, I
stagger.
don't know
Dumbo
where
is
he's at.
Kind of interesting.
Which one?
Dumbo.
I'm not playing that argument with you.
I think it's a bad movie that has a really interesting meta message that I'm not sure Disney even realized was there.
I
Once
think
again-
I'm with you there.
Yeah.
Once again, just no.
Anyway,
Not for me.
the Burton rabbit hole ends here. The Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole stops. So let's.
Number
Remember when they
one.
made a sequel and it was awful? Yeah,
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for that
you're
reminder.
welcome. Sorry.
Number one.
Let's get to our number one movies about fatherhood. So, Ryan, what do you got?
Well, talk about a movie that has like a ton of things to say. It talks a lot about so many broad, gigantic topics within our modern era and in the past. Big American epic is what you would kind of call it. But at the core of it also, too, is this father-son dynamic that is manipulated and then also discarded and betrayed and has a lot of interesting layers when you think about it, and that of course is in Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood.
Yeah,
Which,
okay, I was wondering where you were going with this because I
Yeah.
felt like you were describing The Godfather, and it's like
I
you said-
was. I know.
This one crossed my mind, but fatherhood is like the 10th thing I think about when I
It
think about
is,
There Will Be
but the
Blood.
more I think about it too, I think about it also from the standpoint of what HW means to Daniel Plainview in this movie. The more every time I watch this movie, I think about HW.
And it does end up being the greatest regret of his entire life. The thing
Yeah.
that drives him to madness, really.
Yeah, it's that, and then also too, from the beginning of that film, the coda at the end of that sort of silent, no dialogue yet, driven by the sound and Johnny Greenwood's score opening, is the taking in of HW, the innocence on the train of Daniel. They're looking at HW not yet as a ploy to get into these homes of these desperate people, but of a man taking care of a child. And it's very innocent at this point. And then over time, HW becomes a part of the business, and he's the cute face at the front of this family business. The rival, oil barons essentially goes, if I had that cute face to take across these states, then I wouldn't have a problem essentially getting the deals that I get. And he uses HW, but also too, there's the great stuff when they go quote unquote quail hunting, and Daniel's talking to HW, and they both are from the same mindset, even though they have no blood ties related to one another. They are built of the same kinetic fabric because Daniel's obviously taught him that, but it's in his blood from his father, his original father that passes away in the well. And yes, the biggest regret, Jay, you're absolutely right, in Daniel Plainview's life is the fact that in the time of his biggest producing monumental achievement of his career with that well busting open, his son essentially loses his hearing and he abandons him.
I've abandoned my boy.
I abandoned
I've
my
abandoned
child. And then he does it a second time by taking him to the hearing school,
bastard from a basket,
and throws him away. And what is and his anger is to go at Paul Dano and said, aren't you a healer? Aren't you a vessel for the Holy Spirit? And slap him around. But it's to get out his frustrations of the anger that he has internally for allowing this to happen. And then, of course, when HW returns and he's so excited to see him, what does HW do if not slap him back in the face and say, and basically without words, that you did abandon me and that I needed you at my most vulnerable and you threw me away. And then, of course, like you guys had mentioned, there is the heartbreaking scenes at the end where there is this, he confesses in drunken anger. I wouldn't even, he just is at this point senile. The truth about HW and what is essentially, I do not believe to be the truth, but just the truth to get him out of his face.
Oh yeah,
and it's
the whole
just to say the most
there is sort of the flashback is meant to cue us in as an audience that what Plainview is saying is really more for his own ego than anything else, and
it's devastating. And calling him the competition at the end, you're and saying you're lower than a bastard.
Competitor.
Yeah, you're lower than a bastard, and yet HW there at that moment, I'm going to go with my wife. I'm going to go to this rig and I'm never going to see you again. And it's so heartbreaking to see that. And I know, Jay, that yes, it could be the 10th thing on a list about There Will Be Blood, but it's also true at the heart. It really is about the downfall of Daniel Plainview stems from HW. And as a father, is that he's a broken man because he's a broken father, and it's because he was never equipped for any of this, and he dies alone essentially because of the fact that of this relationship that is the one relationship in his life that's actually good, and it's gone. And he talks about how much he hates people, and there's a reason why. It is because of the fact that he doesn't treat them with any sort of remorse or kindness, and it's devastating because HW is the only thing that people would really like Daniel Plainview for, and then by the end it's gone. And then so it's devastating, and not the best father obviously for a list, but it's definitely a cautionary tale to fathers, I believe, in how you interact and regret having those with your children.
Yeah, I did not think of this one. And honestly, I'm still not sure I would put it as an honorable mention because it is such a distant topic within the film. But to your credit, Ryan, and what you're talking about, you remove that dynamic from the film kind of loses its emotional core in some ways. So like it really is an important element to adding some nuance to not just the film overall, but the character of Daniel Plainview and whether he even still deserves any level of sympathy after what he has done. And I do think having it there is still important. You can't remove it. The movie really falters without it. So, I mean, given that importance, I guess it's a fatherhood aspect that does warrant conversation. I'll simply say that.
There is also, Brendan, in that massive speech, in front of the congregation. I think back, everyone always, like Jay mentioned, I abandoned my child. Yeah. The line is, I abandoned my child. And he says it twice, but the one that always gets me and kind of breaks me on the inside is, I abandoned my boy. Yeah. I abandoned, essentially, it's not something that Eli's telling him at this point. He's like, I've abandoned my boy. I abandoned him. And I know I did it, and I can never, ever, ever get that back. Get that trust back. It's lost. It's lost at that point. And it's something that's going to haunt him and chase him for the end of his life. Yeah.
Good film.
It's fine. It's a fine movie. I don't know.
I need to watch that movie again. I was supposed to see it on 70 last year and I couldn't make it. Which was, I think, the fault of fatherhood is I think the main reason I couldn't go to that.
Well, now, it's officially a dad movie now. There you go.
The evils of fatherhood rearing their ugly head. But
you're probably thinking about Jet, this bastard in this basket preventing me from going to the movies.
God, I wanted to see it on 70.
How about for my number one? Let's go from one Anderson to another. And
I know where you're going with this. JD's he's gonna be happy, I bet.
One of the most idiosyncratic filmmakers currently working, and this is, every time I watch this movie, as much as I like the stuff that he's making now, I'm just like, he's never going to top this, is he? He just, in my eyes, he's never going to top it. And
you're going to make me cry.
The reason that he's never going to top it is because of the lead performance from one of the great actors of all time. If we get into a conversation and you're like, Gene Hackman is the greatest actor of all time, I will say, you're on to something there. You might be right. Because he is phenomenal in general and especially phenomenal in The Royal Tenenbaums, a film that has this huge ensemble cast, but the main through line is about how Royal Tenenbaum himself has impacted this family. His demise has really resulted in everything that you see through this movie. His relationship with his children is what leads to attempted suicide. It's what leads to overly aggressive helicopter parenting. It's what leads to semi-incestuous love. It's what leads to a broken ex-wife. It's what leads to everything that you see in the film. As much as this film is about so many things going on in these individual characters' lives, they all kind of branch off of the way that Royal has impacted these people, neglected these people, abused these people to a certain extent. And it's also about how he kind of, despite his own impulses, finds a way to reconnect with his family. And it's tragic, it's heartbreaking, it's hilarious, it's touching. It is all of those things at once. I mean, when you see Ben Stiller and Gene Hackman in the middle of the street, and what does Ben Stiller say? Something along the lines of like, it's been a long year, Dad. It's been a rough year, Dad. And it is, I mean, it's a knockout, an absolute knockout. I know, Chazzy. Yeah. It is, as you know, an emotional gut punch that has rarely really been matched, and it's all because of, in that instance, Stiller, but also Hackman's finally kind of opening up to any extent whatsoever. It's just an incredible performance from Hackman that captures how bad of a father he was, but also at times, through this really, really tough exterior, exposes how regretful he is of the way that he acted towards the people that he really, truly does love at the end of his life. It's an incredible performance from the father figure of the family, an incredible film. To me, the most human movie that Wes Anderson has ever made and probably will ever make, given kind of the trajectory of where he's going. It's a remarkable film. Absolutely adore the movie, and it's probably my favorite movie about fatherhood that isn't The Tree of Life, because I'm not allowed to talk about that movie anymore.
You're not.
You mentioned it too much now. You got to stop it. We told you to stop.
The Tree of Life, a big plot point in Shazam! Fury of the Gods.
He's not wrong. He is not wrong. We'll get to that on that
I
review.
swear to God, you got to be joking. But at the same time,
kind of, but kind of not.
Okay.
Yeah, but still kind of right.
It's kind of the MacGuffin of the movie.
It kind of is.
Oh.
Yeah, Terrence Malick.
Terry
is
Malick,
the
the MacGuffin of a DC movie?
Yes.
Yeah,
The most elusive MacGuffin of them all, Terrence Malick.
With regard to the Royal Tannenbaums, I kind of rolled the dice with this one. This was for a while my number 5, but I put Creed 2 in at the last minute, thinking, I think Jay's gonna have it somewhere.
I'm actually shocked that you had this, because you're.
I'm not.
Because you are. Because he's the most cynical when it comes to Wes Anderson around here. And
well,
even
that
still,
might
I would
be
think,
true. I like so many Wes Anderson movies, but
I know.
If
but
you tell
don't
me to
just
watch 5 Wes Anderson movies in a row, I'll be like, oh
that's
my
a great
God.
point. You know, I really like Wes Anderson movies as well, but he's not really the kind of filmmaker you could do a movie series on. Because,
Yeah.
like watching them all together, there is something that kind of blurs.
It's like
between
eating
them.
Fun Dip.
I'll be
Sugar
doing this
dipped in sugar.
exercise later this year. So it's really wild that you guys are saying this, because I'm going to literally be doing this exercise later.
But Royal
this year.
Tannenbaums
So
to me
ironic.
is the one that feels, weirdly, because it was earlier in his career, it feels the most mature to me. It has darkness that a lot more explicit darkness that a lot of his later films don't.
Even
really
visually,
have.
it's not.
Even visually,
Yeah.
like it doesn't have as much of the like the dollhouse aesthetic that he's kind of known for. Like they're like the sense of place there feels a lot more open. It feels more lived in, as opposed to being almost like designed to look like miniatures. And I think that kind of helps with a movie like that is meant to be a bit more tender
agree.
and sincere. And I love that about it.
No, I love the film too, Jay. It's not my favorite Anderson, but it's going into the rewatch. It's one that I desperately want to rewatch, and I just think of Hackman's performance and Stiller's performance too, alongside him in that
Luke
scene
Wilson
throughout the
for
film
me
too.
in that movie.
Wilson's great,
Incredible.
Danny Glover's great, just in a couple of scenes too, and obviously Angelica Houston. Yeah, it's a great ensemble.
Incredible
cast, so.
needle drops too. Man.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Probably
good Lord.
probably top 3 Anderson for me. I do
Yeah.
love Fantastic Mr. Fox and Grand Budapest Hotel, and honestly, between those 3, it really just depends on what my mood is. Honestly,
Man, that's a top 3 right there. That's probably mine as well.
anyway, from my number 1 movie about fatherhood, I mean, come on, guys. You should know I'm going to talk about Charlie Chaplin here. I mean, of course I'm going to talk about Charlie Chaplin.
Honorable mention for me. I
The Great
figured you would have
Dictator.
it. I left
Let's
it
go.
out.
Great. The father of a certain nation, yes.
Gold Rush.
Yeah.
I am, of course, talking about the 1921 film The Kid, which, 1921. This film recently turned 100 years old. It's over
That's
100
crazy.
years now. It's insane. And this was Charlie Chaplin's first feature-length film, which is kind of interesting to say, given the fact that the film is, just under an hour long. By today's standards, it's still a short film. But at that time, it was his first feature-length, and this one, I guess, is a little different than some of the ones I talked about on this list, but it's not too far off from other examples of movies about fatherhood. I think it was something you mentioned, Jay, the idea of the surrogate father and how that could be a powerful notion. And I think this is perhaps the best example of that specific thing. It's very indirect in its depiction of fatherhood because it doesn't feature a literal father and his child. But what I love about the film is that doesn't make it any less real. And I think a lot of that too is the realism that existed behind the scenes while making the movie. Chaplin and young actor Jackie Coogan, who plays the titular kid, they had a genuine relationship off screen that then translated to the relationship that we see on screen. And that's why it feels so honest and real. I think it might be among the best examples of paternal love, regardless of circumstance. I think that key aspect about circumstance and how that leads to a need to protect a young mind and an innocent child that has no idea of what his or her surroundings are. And the fact that this tramp doesn't have to do that. I think that's the beauty of this movie, is that he learns and chooses to do that as opposed to just feeling like he's obligated to. And I think that's the beauty of the film. It's not my favorite Chaplin film, but I think with regard to this emotional core here, I think it is one of his most honest and maybe one of his most meta, given his own relationship with Jackie Coogan. I think it's a beautiful film.
Yeah, it's an all-time classic. I don't need
a great film. It's one of my favorite Chaplins for sure. Top.
I think you like Modern Times the most, right?
Modern Times is my favorite.
Me too.
I like The Kid more than City Lights, which I think is the one that you're supposed to think is the best. But.
Well, I mean, City Lights is my favorite, but I think of all the ones you watched, which I think were maybe 4 or 5 of them, didn't you put City Lights towards the bottom?
Yeah, I think I liked Gold Rush slightly more. I definitely liked City Lights more than The Circus.
Okay.
Yeah,
but I guess
I like the
might
Great
be
Dictator,
forgetting one or two.
a lot. That's.
But I still haven't seen The Great Dictator. Or
you really should, Jay.
I'd be curious what you think about Limelight. That's a very interesting.
Yeah, Limelight. Yeah,
that's one I need to cross off.
Yeah,
I have not caught up with that one.
Yeah, very good film. Very good director.
I own it.
It's good. Watch it, man. Yeah. Just sit down and watch
it.
That's your homework.
Bye, everyone.
You can't leave yet. We have honorable mentions to get to here. Come on. So let's talk about some honorable mentions that just missed our respective top 5 movies about fatherhood. Ryan, what did you have that just missed your list?
Well, obviously, The Incredibles.
Okay.
Finding Nemo.
Yeah.
How to Train Your Dragon.
Sure.
Heard of it? JD has.
Oh yeah.
Field of Dreams.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Have that here. Crossing it off.
The Birdcage.
Oh, okay.
In the Name of the Father. October Sky. Ordinary People. That one's a little bit of a twist, but if you watch the end of that movie, it's definitely about fatherhood and the lack of communication of a father there. The Fabelmans, another Steven Spielberg film, especially more recently. Fantastic Mr. Fox, which is another Wes Anderson film. Includes I don't care what anybody says here. Boyhood, Richard Linklater's film. In particular, the stuff with Eller Coltrane and Ethan Hawke.
Jay,
I don't
you're
care
fired.
what you say.
Jay, you're fired.
It's perfect there. I think Call Me by Your Name, obviously, for everybody online, they would consider that, especially towards the end, and that's those scenes there.
Certainly in the conversation for best fatherly monologues.
That's why it was an honorable mention. It wasn't like a big thing. Obviously, The Tree of Life, Indiana Jones: Last Crusade, Jay mentioned earlier. You could go with the original Disney classic. You could go with Guillermo del Toro's. You cannot go with Robert Zemeckis' version of Pinocchio.
Well, hold on.
Don't. And then lastly, because nobody's going to mention him other than I will, Robert Altman's Popeye. Boom. There you go.
Okay. I love that movie.
It's not just about the child. It's also about his relationship with his father. And there's got a father throughout that entire
piece of that movie. That's fine. Okay.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
For
I had to get it in there somehow.
Yeah, you definitely crossed off a few of mine, but Father of the Bride, I think, is a really fun movie. Steve Martin. One of my favorite Sandler comedies, Big Daddy. I like a lot.
Which is basically Chaplin's The Kid.
Pretty much.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
How about Knocked Up? Certainly a film about impending fatherhood, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The David Lean film Hobson's Choice, which I think is his most underrated film. I enjoy a lot. Steve Jobs, I would say maybe the biggest flaw of that film is that Danny Boyle thinks everything that Steve Jobs ever did was because of his fatherly insecurities, but it's certainly a film about fatherhood.
Not just Danny Boyle, but Aaron Sorkin as well.
Well, yes, very true, very true. Kramer versus Kramer, I think, is a very good film, and Borat's subsequent movie film, big time fatherhood film. That is the driving force of that entire movie.
That is. Yeah,
that's an inspired pick. I don't have many honorable mentions now because most of them were crossed off. I will just echo once again, Midnight Special, the Jeff Nichols film, which is one that JD Duran holds very close to his heart. Did anyone mention The Lion King? I couldn't tell if someone did say that, but that's what I did consider as well. For a few others quickly, I guess Kramer versus Kramer can kind of fall into that category a little bit. Mrs. Doubtfire is another one I thought about.
Hello.
Very quotable movie. I really like that movie. And the last one I have here, I feel like you can go with the entire franchise, but I'm going to pick one specifically that I think is most about the idea of fatherhood. Return of the Jedi. I think very much embodies those things too. I mean, the whole franchise becomes about fatherhood in its own way, but I feel like that's the movie where it's most representative.
That's very true.
I think those final minutes. I think Return of the Jedi is a very good Star Wars film. I think it's one of the better ones.
Yeah. I mean, you can't forget Toy Story, Absentee Fathers. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, in some ways, the ghost of a father figure that may or may not have had a life there. So
may or may not. Pixar will never tell you. For sure. And then just because, weirdly enough, Jay, you mentioned Steve Jobs, and I know that I just have to mention this because I think it's one of the most ridiculous scenes of all time of the last 20 years, and you really like this movie depending on the scene from a lot of people when you talk about them. But if you're talking about Aaron Sorkin, Molly's Game is a movie too.
I was going to say Moneyball.
Moneyball too, but Molly's Game.
Yeah.
They're both hinge upon, I think, the relationships of parents there, particularly Costner's scene there, whether you like that or not. I know a lot of people don't.
The guitar scene in Moneyball.
Yeah, which is fantastic. And then used at the end. The song is used at the end.
Some people might call it fantastic.
Yeah. I love Moneyball, and it's one of the best of the last decade. So you keep your opinions to yourself, Mr.
Which I guess the moral of this entire conversation is lots of movies out there regarding fatherhood that you can.
JD, you got a lot to watch.
Yeah,
he's got a lot to watch.
You can't come back until you watch them all and give us full reviews of them. That we can put them up on InSessionFilm.com.
It's all about the homework there. For those of you listening, let us know how your picks stack up against ours. You can email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com or hit us up on social media. You know what, gentlemen, given the length of time we talked about these, I think we're going to forego this week's poll and just get to the end right here and cross this episode off. Our first one in the books with the three of us on this new format. I feel like we did pretty well. I think JD will be proud of us. Let's keep the momentum going for the next few months. As far as a few plugs as we round out this episode, be on the lookout for a review of Shazam! Fury of the Gods that myself and Jay Ledbetter will be doing. It'll either be before or after this specific episode here, so be on the lookout for that. As far as next week on the main show, episode 527, it will be inspired by John Wick Chapter 4 in some way. I think the topics at hand will be something along the lines of best action sequences, which is one I actually think would be a lot of fun to do. We may also talk about action movie stars, something regarding Keanu Reeves. And on that note, we will also have a review of John Wick Chapter 4 around that same time. Been hearing really good things about this one. I know Ryan has seen it already. Don't spoil too many thoughts, but I know you liked it. I'll simply say that.
Cinema's back, baby.
Oh, good stuff. Also want to plug our latest Women in Session. Kristen Battistella and Zeta Short talked about the films of Sidney Pollack and had a great conversation there. And the last plug here, we're also in the middle of a movie series. Jay and Ryan, what are you guys doing? What's coming up next?
Well, this week we will be reviewing Chungking Express. We were supposed to do it last week, but it was my fault. I was at South by Southwest, and I'll admit it. It was my fault that we didn't record
He's
last
a busy
week.
man, folks. He's a busy man.
I was doing a lot, seeing a lot, and I was like, Jay, I need to sleep.
You just needed
so-
you just needed 2 weeks to marinate on Chungking Express.
Hey, you
There's
know
a
what?
lot to
Honestly,
it.
there is a lot to that movie, so that's you're not far off. But yeah, we'll be doing that, and the rest of Wrong Car Why we'll be picking it back up. We're gonna try to do. I mean, there'll be a lot of recordings that we'll be doing over the next couple of weeks together. So these three guys that you see on screen, we're probably gonna get really sick of each other at a certain point, but we're doing it for you guys. But we're doing it also for our love of cinema, and so we're gonna continue that Wong Kar-wai series because, damn it, we love doing it.
Yeah. Good director. I think this
pretty good at his job. I don't know. We're only 2 films in. We'll be the judge of the rest of the way. All right. All right.
This movie
Put the
here,
cart before the horse. You know what I mean?
I'm gonna try to selfishly see if I can make time for this specific episode on Chungking Express. I want to try and join for at least 1 or 2 episodes you guys do during this Wong Kar-wai movie series. Obviously, I don't want to join on In the Mood for Love. JD and I did a full review of that movie some time ago on the main show. I think a year or so ago. So that should be you guys holding down the fort. But
yeah, I think we're gonna have some guests on for
Chungking Express and 2046.
That's that would be another good one too. I mean, with between those two, In the Mood for Love, 2046, and Days of Being Wild, kind of its own unofficial trilogy of sorts.
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff. So yeah, be on the lookout for that episode on Wong Kar-wai, Chungking Express. Really good movie. Of course, if you like what you're hearing, you can follow us on social media at InSession Film. You can also subscribe to us here on YouTube. Please do that as well. We're also on your favorite podcast app of choice. Be sure to listen to us there. Leave us a review, leave us a comment, let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you think of the new format. Hopefully you're enjoying what we're doing here. And of course, hit us up on Patreon for exclusive content that we release specifically there. Gentlemen, any final thoughts on anything as we round out this conversation on dads?
I'm sorry to my son that these are the films I think about when I think about fatherhood, I guess. Maybe it speaks to my desire to be a good father that I'm so focused on negative depictions of fatherhood.
That's the excuse. I mean, I don't want to even call it an excuse. I think that's actually psychologically, what it is. It makes sense.
I need to see a therapist, guys.
And to my future children, just know I will never have you watch movies off Jay's list.
Rad dad alert. Rad dad alert.
It'll all be positivity. It will never be anything. No, I'm just kidding. No, in all honesty, this is a great exercise. I do want to reiterate again how excited we are to have Andrew now as a part of the InSession Film family, and so happy for Brandy and JD and Sam and everybody there, all the Durans having a new beautiful baby in their lives, and a new beautiful baby in our InSession Film family too. It's going to be a great time. I know that they won't have sleep for a while. I have no room to complain about sleep right now with a new child in their house. But yeah, just so excited that everyone's healthy and safe, and yeah, now movie time. Movie time indefinitely. It'll be interesting to see, like you mentioned, Brendan, that JD's watch Dog Day Afternoon. It'll be interesting to see what movies he watches, and he'll be logging them on Letterboxd and all those different things.
I remember early fatherhood was movie time. That was
yeah.
Because you had like this.
You might have to chop them up into pieces. But I remember Jet sleeping. I was watching Man on Fire. It was good. It was good times. Specifically, I don't know why, but that one sticks out in my mind as like he was sleeping over there.
That just seems so rad dad right there. Like that's just what I envision.
I did my Tony Scott wormhole during early part of right after we had Jet. Weirdly, but
I feel like we're gonna have to translate those films over to a movie series.
Man on Fire. That's a good movie about surrogate dads.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about T. Scott because we talked about the Riddler before. You know what I mean?
Yeah, dude, T. Scott, I love that.
That was a
Good
good
guy.
I feel like this whole episode was finding
He's a
content for
good
future
guy.
movie series.
I'm just saying. I mean, we haven't been around each other a long time, and we are going to be. We might as well just start talking about it live on here.
Might as well find things we want to talk about. That's the whole.
Listen, I
point
got
of this.
graphs behind me and PowerPoint presentations for what we're going to be doing the next couple of weeks. So just all
right, let's
point
see.
to what you like.
Let's find the statistical and financial.
You're talking to
analysis for
Mr.
all that.
Spreadsheet over here.
There you go.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Anyway, with all of that said, hopefully all of you enjoyed what we had to say about these literal dad movies. Look out for action films galore next week on episode 527, and we will see you all next time on the InSession Film Podcast.
Lowe's knows how to get your lawn ready for spring. And right now, you can get up to $20 off select Scott's Triple Action Fertilizer. Plus, get a Cobalt 40-volt 15-inch string trimmer or leaf blower. Your choice, $149, only at Lowe's. Get set for spring. Visit us in-store or online today, because Lowe's knows home improvement. Valid 3/9 through 3/22. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. Excludes Alaska and Hawaii.